My name is Simniki Wekanga. I work alongside my colleague, who's the project manager, Luvuyo Maseko, and he will also be joining us this afternoon. I don't want to waste any more time, but I'd like to just mention that it's an exciting panel that we've got here for you today. Our youth portfolio has been working on the mental well-being campaign for the past 6 months. And our aim was to ensure that we raise awareness as well as collaborate with organizations in finding out what is best practice, as well as look at some of the youth-led innovations that have come up throughout our work on this campaign. And this afternoon, we have Sihle, who will be leading and starting this conversation through her storytelling. Excellent way of just showcasing and tying in together the mental well-being piece when we're looking at storytelling as a tool. And Sihle is just an amazing speaker. I mean, I'm not going to talk any further about Sihle because I want her to introduce herself and get to share with us about her work and also her journey regarding storytelling and the mental well-being and the solutions around how we can address some of the things that we face as a country and globally. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sihle.
Hello, everybody. I feel like Sumnika shortcutted that. She's like, I'm not going to read the bio that she sent to me, but I'll allow you to introduce yourself. So without further ado, let me get straight into it. Molen Betuna, I wish I could be able to see all of you. It would be such a joy to be in the same room and to be able to connect. But with this cold and with the endings of COVID and our uncertainty around it, we have to be in this environment once more. I am originally from the Eastern Cape. I'd sent Sumnika a much more lovelier bio, so it's much harder to try to introduce yourself. But I am an author and I'm the writer of the Wonder Children's books. I'm a storyteller, really. So I do a lot of work in schools, amongst teachers, teaching how to teach for enjoyment, really, and to be able to cultivate literacy. I'm also an academic. I'm still in proceedings with my PhD, and so I did a lot of work at the University of Pretoria, working with a lot of students, which I think is what validates my ability to speak here today, the work that I was doing primarily with students around psychosocial support. When the pandemic began, I kind of left my job and began to do my own work. And so now I am the head producer of the Ultimate Book Show, which is a premium book show for television. And really it's about exploring the interiority of being, and the inspiration behind the works of extraordinary African writers. We just came back from France in Cannes because it was selected to be presented there, and that was such a great honor. And so I'm hoping that this conversation really can be a full exploration of being, which is what I really care most about, the interiority, ubuntu bakho, and your sense of self. So I can see there's 78 people here. I think I just kind of want to see a bit more. Let me just change my screen so I can see a lot more people. Oh yes, hello everybody. Hi. Now I feel like I'm like talking to you. I say hi Mbali, hi Leandra, Ayesha, Deborah, Zubeida, Shanti. Hello. Lovely. Hi Pilani, Molen Betuna. Anytime that you want to laugh or you want to talk, please feel free to engage. You know, I think the funniest thing about being a children's storyteller in particular is that you'll be in the middle of a reading. And I'm like, and then this happened and this happened. And a kid will just come and they'll say, look at the sun. And in that moment, I have to literally be like, oh, the sun, right? So if at any point during this chat, you feel like saying, look at the sun, you're most welcome to either write something in the chat box or even to just open your, unmute yourself and laugh if you'd like to, or have a chat. So I've titled our yes, thank you for the feedback. So I've titled this conversation today, Deserted Homes. And when Luvuyo first approached me, I said to him, you know what, I think you should ask other people that have a lot more experience around mental health. And he was like, no, I want you to come. And so I mean, I guess part of this will be a talk really about mental health, but I do want to put a disclaimer that I have no expertise in mental health. And so that's not going to be something that I'm assuming, because I think that's something that's incredibly serious, right? I think the disease of mental health is something that cannot be taken lightly or spoken of in like motivational terms. And so I don't want to appear to do that at all today. But I actually want us to explore the idea of houses and homes and ourselves as human beings right here today, Wena Pilani, Wena Mbali, Wena Vilko, Zubeida, to in this very moment, think about yourself as the idea of a home, right? So if you just have a second right now and you think about if you were a home, what kind of home do you perceive yourself to be? And you're welcome to write something in the comments. So before I get into a poem that I've written, I just want you to take a moment to think about this idea of a home, right? Or a house, if you want to think of it as that, and to think about what makes a home. But if somebody had to say, describe the state of your home to me right now, what would be the descriptor of your home? Yes, Nagnasiva says a welcoming warm home. Yes. So what is the descriptor of the home that you are in right now? So if you had to choose one word that describes your house, that describes your home, what is that descriptor of your home?
Dope.
Comfortable, somebody says. So you're welcome to answer as a house full of light and prayer. I love that.
My description is my house is dope.
My house is dope. Yes, a safe. I love that. Wendy says a safe home. Kate says a welcoming home. Somebody else says a safe place. Yes. A fun house, safe and healthy. And so I love the fact that all of these descriptors are coming in right now. So what I want to do before we even start is that I want to read a poem that I've kind of written as a reflection point about this conversation and the idea of different homes. Crazy in a good way. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. So the idea of a home comes from a line from one of my friend's books called An Image in a Mirror. And in this, her name is Ajangalet Esogwang, and she says, it's like seeing a deserted house from across the street and thinking nothing happens between its walls, right? Somebody says also this home is full of laughter. So in the same breath, if you were to think about the kind of home you don't want to be in, what is the immediate thought of a house where you're like, man, I don't want to be in that home, right? Like, so we've spoken about the warm home, the home full of laughter, the healthy home, the safe home. What is the kind of home that you know, I don't want to be in that particular house? What is the word that comes to mind for that kind of home? So if you can feel free. Toxic, judgmental, cold, negative house, somebody says.
Hostile.
Hostile, loud, somebody, unstable, yes. And so I think what you're almost immediately getting a sense of, there's like toxic chaos in this other house, right? And it's like, that's not the kind of environment that I want to find myself in. This home that's full of judgment, that's full of coldness, that's full of chaos or instability. But the kind of home that I really would want to be is one that is safe, that is full of laughter, that is warm, that is kind, and that's loving. And so Jangalet says in her book, which is an image in a mirror, says, it's like seeing a deserted house from across the street and thinking nothing happens between its walls. But you look through the window and you realize, oh, so much happens in this home. And what I want to put forward is that even in the most judgmental, cold, and difficult houses, what the people that are in that house really want is a sense of peace, right? And so I've written something here that's called deserted homes. I'm going to quickly read it to you and then get into this conversation. It says, deserted homes. There are dry grounds and unwatered gardens. There's peeling paint in this house. Trees sneak out of the corners of this home. It had seemed as though this home was going to be beautiful. Yathi nina landlu bethuna, bayaphi na abantu baphayana. There are other homes in this broken republic, in this South Africa, our land. These small hokkies that are made of corrugated iron, squared in sharp wires and hidden by long walls. These homes, so easily scorched by the fires of the sun. Eli cala lendlu likhaya lomntu. Ngumntu elikhaya. Kukho umntu ophaya, awumboni na? So then why does the sun scorch these corrugated irons over and over and over? And why does the sun evoke fires in these houses and burn instead of scorching the pain and the injustice? Then there is this home of mine, this one in which I must live too. Whew, so ridden by longing and want, this unending search for belonging and becoming. This house in which I live that carries my mind and spirit, sometimes feeling so broken, this too is a home. So who are your friends exactly? Where do you belong? One asks of this home. Except Majida hele out all styles. Oh, how my soul longed to be umtu, to be adorned and validated in ways that said, nawe ungumtu, intle lendlu yakho. Some occasional blue air would breathe in amid the grumbling and the grinding chains in kitchens, curling over my hard-working mother, too tired to nurture us after the long days of work. And so the children begin to cook, Skotselmausen they grow, their seeming maturity is now heightened by their absent fathers. And yet in this home, there is an innocence that is lost here, that is unaccounted for, that is unquantified and never really to be known. And yet this pain of this innocence lost seeps into the adult life. There is a rare attention that was never given, senses that were never breastfed. This kid who had grown too quick, this house that had to be quickly built, lest did not know that it is not nourished. These uncultivated grounds where flowers had to bloom. Kaloku wena ulibhelekazi ilanga lokulunga kodwa uboni na uba eli langa liyanditshisa. They said we had joy on the playground, and so we skipped, circling on jungle gyms, grasping for breath, oblivious to the life that maybe we could have had if we had a little bit more. This innocence that was lost, this longing for a longer hug that was forsaken, the love we missed. We had to grow in this plateau, building houses on sand, glimmers of blue air here and there. Ever noticed how we built these homes? Or how these black homes had these trees or these plants that blossomed over the room dividers and flaunted everywhere, spiraling all through the home, floating and creating a canvas because they really could not be built on solid ground. Our homes, like mountains, almost crowded together. This mass gathering on Sunday services, we toddled together, seeking some kind of rest, to inhale some breath from the heaven. We flailed our hands into the horizon. We prayed and we praised, hoping that it would free us of this longing in our souls. The God of the heavens, we would ask him to erase this loneliness and the parchedness of the soul, this need to belong, to find friends, somebody to say, nawe kaloku ungumntu. We had always wanted more, but the days remained undistinguished, weaving themselves one into another, creating a sub-kind of life. We know that there is a thing that we want of this life of ours that we have not seen yet, a peace at the end of the breaking branch. Yet with what we have built nonetheless, turned our houses into homes. We have made crystals of the slippery slants, making our homes glisten with stardust, even though they're slipping away. And so we carry the rocks trying to build this house, and we make music from its beats and its hardships. And for a moment, in those quiet moments, in those crystal clear, in those moments of perfect peace, we let our lives bloom into something miraculously clear. And there we believe that also we can become homes that let others in. And that's the end of the poem. Nawe kaloku ungumntu. And what I had been thinking about as I wrote that is the sense of wanting to be full or to be in a home that is covered. And yet so many times, I think that there is a kind of lovelessness that we know in our souls that we so long for, that we haven't quite had the language to be able to articulate, want to ourselves because needing it feels like wanting too much. And I think if you think of so many Black homes in particular, I remember as a kid, I'd always like go and like almost like cuddle by my aunt or my mother. And they'd always say to me, because nobody can provide this kind of nourishment and particular attention. But I think that the result isn't that we need that less, but that we learn to wean the need more and more. And if you think about a child, right, and if you think about mothering and what a mother does between themselves and the child, there's a kind of bonding that only happens through this kind of breastfeeding. And when the time comes, and sometimes the child will suckle for much longer than needs to be, they go to, hey, this child needs to be weaned, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that they've had enough of that particular connection and that particular kind of bonding and that particular kind of nourishment, but that sometimes has to be taken prematurely. And what I have found in the work that I've been doing for so many of my students, especially working at the University of Pretoria, are all the ways in which the words that needed to be said, particularly by somebody who's a caregiver, that so many people have never actually heard being said to them. And so much of the longing that is outside is this pursuit of, can somebody affirm me in the ways that I need to be affirmed without having to say that this is what I need? Because somewhere saying it feels like at this stage, it's too late because you should have gotten that much earlier on in your life, right? Does anybody relate to what I'm saying? And so much of the identity of the being of this child is then formed sometimes by what they are not getting, or about the idea that is being given to them outside of their own home, where there should be warmth, where there should be enough nourishment, where there should be enough attention. And what ends up happening is that we're seeking almost symbolisms of identity that gives us the stamp that we belong, so that we don't feel like we need to get that particular nourishment by suckling more, right? And as I say this, there's a really interesting book by Professor Kopana Ratela called Liberating Masculinities. And I mentioned a little bit of it here because he writes about his teen years, and he says, when he moved and he lived in the township, he says, all he wanted so desperately was to have a pair of all-stars. And he says, in my child mind, it felt like if I could just get this pair of all-stars, then they'll recognize me as a man, right? So there's a particular work that needs to be done for somebody to grow into their manhood. Yet the understanding in that particular context was that if they can have this particular symbolism, right, then they would be able to assert themselves. So they would suddenly have right to speak and to be heard. And so this long, and he says it was almost so soul crushing. And he says, I can almost vividly remember the longing of it and how much I felt like nothingness because I did not have this particular symbolism of being. And I think if all of you can just start to just maybe recall a time in your own life where you think, all I wanted was to be validated in that space, for somebody to say, hey, I see you. Hey, I noticed that you weren't here yesterday. Oh, hey, I really think that this is what you're good at, right? That it would have felt like you were visible. And I think this big question of visibility is such a strong and hard and heart-wrenching and aching one for so many young people today. And I want to give almost two examples at this particular point. The one is, there's a student of mine during the pandemic who came to me and they said, ma'am, I feel like I can feel that my grades are about to drop. And he said, the reason why is because when we were on campus, this is at the University of Pretoria, when we were on campus, at the end of each class, I would quickly run and go and speak to my lecturer and ask them the questions that I have about the actual lecture. Now that we actually have to speak on a mic with everybody there, I'm so afraid to unmute myself because if I speak, I feel like everybody will hear my accent and they'll know the kind of school that I went to. So I would rather just not ask, right? And what you're hearing from that person is they're saying that in that particular classroom, I feel like the way in which I speak suggests to everybody else that I'm not enough of what I should be, right? That actually my voice is not regardable, it's not visible. And so I would rather do it in silence in the corner of this home. And I think when we speak about a home that almost is growing its own trees and peeling out, that's a home that has no light in, right? So if you think about that particular student, what they're saying is that I don't know how to speak in the open and to let the light in and to have other people hear what I think and for them to hear my voice. And so I would rather go into the back corner. But now what's happening is that I'm encroached in because I don't have the opportunity to speak in the darkness that I know that makes me feel like I'm okay in that particular smallness, right? And so those kinds of elements that are supposed to give bearing to the rightness of our houses, right? When we don't have them, sometimes we try to escape our own house, right? So you want to go and live in other people's houses. One friend of mine who's really, really hilarious and so honest about her background comes from ePhilip. He always says, Jogandombi, when they leave school, she's like, I would run away because I wouldn't want people to know that sithengisa utywala ekhaya, because that's the only way that my mother was able to make money, right? And he says, because I was so ashamed of the kind of background, I thought that it wouldn't, and people wouldn't understand, like, how do you speak so confidently and so rightfully and take up space, right? And so there's all these kinds of ideas about what kind of house we think we should be coming from. And my invitation today around mental well-being is to say, sometimes the truth of it is that we are unnourished, right? The truth of it is that already there's something that we should have had that we haven't had. And that there is no ill in being able to acknowledge the need for love in that home, to say, all I wanted was a little bit more warmth. And I haven't had that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm incapable of cultivating that kind of experience in the world, right? I was thinking about it earlier on today, and I was thinking, you know, there's something really funny about growing up in a household with lots of people. What I think I could never understand as a child was why we needed to clean the house every single day. Like, dishes needed to be washed every day, right? Like, every day. And there was like a roster, right? Like, of like, it's your turn today, it's your turn the next day, right? But what I think is absolutely amusing, think about the times where you were certain that it was not your turn to wash the dishes. There is no way, right? Like, you're pretty sure I washed them just yesterday, right? Like, so there is no way that this is my responsibility today. And what's funny is that, like, you generations, you watch the news and you're thinking it's somebody else's turn, and somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, it's your turn. You're like, no ways, it's not my turn. I definitely washed the dishes. And you're pretty sure, you're convinced in your mind. And then somebody starts to recall and they say, no, Ngomvulo, Pilani washed the dishes. On Tuesday, Simniki will wash the dishes. On Wednesday, Ayesha washed the dishes. So today, Leandra, it's your turn, right? And you stuck there like, oh my God, it's my turn. Like, and you almost have like, you know, like the tail between your legs. Oh, shucks, it really is. It's my turn to do the work of keeping the house clean, right? And what I almost want to invite you to is to say, there is a work that is so hard, and sometimes that feels so unnecessary, that is required to let the light in to the house. And sometimes you're like, no, it's not my turn, right? Like, I've done so much work already, right? Like, why would it be me that needs to do the work again? But it's like, there is no other person that needs to do the work but you. And the thing that keeps the house clean is the daily, consistent, and very hard work of having to make sure this place is together. What I find almost shocking is how quickly uncared homes spiral into destruction. Have you ever seen a house where it's like, how did that house get like so like broken down and debilitated so quickly, right? Like, and this is the thing about the house of being an adult, of having to carry this soul, this body, the spirit of yours, is that the invitation for it says that in order for you to live and to live well, you have to let the light in consistently. even though the work of letting the light in is so hard, right? I was telling a friend of mine as I was thinking about this conversation that when I was a kid, I remember so well being so uncertain about how to sweep, like what direction to sweep, like actually which way should you be sweeping, right? Like uchayela kanje, okanye uchayela kanje, like in which direction does it go? Right? Do you go to the front or do you go to the back? Like which way should you be sweeping your house? And I remember asking Umanga's mom, I was like, like, you know, like by this time I'm kind of like in the midst of this trash. I'm in between it. And I'm like, which direction do I push? And I remember so vividly with her saying, "Hayi kaloku ntombi, awunozipusha nabo ubumdaka okwakho," right? Like you can't be thrusting yourself into the dirt yourself. You're cleaning the dirt away from yourself. So you're pushing it out, right? And when you don't push it out, you will find yourself muddled and locked up in it such that you can't differentiate who is the dirt and what is the dirt and who am I in all of this, right? Because now suddenly you are in the quagmire of this dirt. And it's saying, being able to differentiate, to say that there is a dirt in my house, right? And all that needs to be done is to clean this out. But what does it take to clean it out, right? It takes some sense of accountability to some extent of the fact that, man, this is hard work. Sometimes I just don't want to do it. The dishes actually are piling up. I don't want to do them, right? Like, and sometimes you look at them and you're like, "Hey, Bo, did I make all these dishes?" Right? It's like, surely not. But what's so amusing, I need to quickly say this, just to kind of lock in that message there. I have one of my grandfathers who's very close to me, has this really funny way of being able to wanting to say they love you. That I find completely amusing. And so he'll write to me, I said, "It's your birthday today." Da, 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 da. And then the last line will say, "Awuyong kunkuma wena san." You are not rubbish. You are not rubbish. So my clan name is Mamngo. So he'll say to me on the phone, "Mamngo, I just want to say to you, Mdanam, you are not rubbish. You are not rubbish, Mamngo. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mamngo. You are not rubbish." And it's so funny. I mean, because I'm so attached to him and I have such a fondness, I'll find it quite emotional. But I'm like, why would I have thought I was rubbish? I'm like, why would I have thought that I was rubbish in the first place, right? But yet there is sometimes an awareness that needs to happen in your mind that the circumstances that are happening in your house and around your house, and sometimes a sense of brokenness and the pain and the rejection and the abandonment and the uncertainty and the fear of not being sure whether you will become, that sometimes the existence of that does not make you the rubbish, right? So the word then becomes, you are not rubbish. There could be rubbish in your house, but that can be cleaned out. And so the question then becomes, what is the work as a grown person, which is so hard sometimes because you're just like, I need somebody else to do the work. It's like, no, just like somebody else hold the load for me. It's too much. And I laugh about it because I think of as a kid, you know, this thing around like this longing for belonging. I remember once saying to my mother, like, I feel like I don't have enough clothes and I'm so tired that you're always buying so much food in the house. There's always this full meal apparently. Like, can't you just reduce my food intake and give me a little bit more money so that I can have a little bit more stylish clothes so that I can belong? And I remember my mother looking at me saying, then I wouldn't be a parent, right? Then I wouldn't be what I need to be to provide you this particular kind of nourishment to you. And when I think about it now, I'm like, shucks, like I am looking for all those things at this particular age of my life. I'm like, I want to look good, but I also know that I need to be at home and taking care of all of this kind of stuff, right? Like, but there's nobody else sometimes to hold the load for you in the ways that you need so that it doesn't feel so heavy, so that you don't spiral into thinking that you're part of the rubbish, so that you actually know that you can open the house and let the light in. So just to close, I think that as we grow up, there comes a time sometimes when the circumstances that you're facing are so difficult, actually, and they require so much emotional courage, and sometimes are just so painful, because what is hard about the rocks that fall on a house is that they're not periodic, right? Sometimes it's not like, you know, a family they'll say, like, death says, oh no, we've already taken one person here, we're not going to come again for the next 5 years. No, sometimes there's no reprieve, right, from the actual difficulties of life. And so what then needs to happen is a kind of honesty and reflection in your own home. To say, maybe at this point in my life, I don't have sufficient skills that are going to enable me to clean my own house well enough, right? Maybe today I don't have the strength to do this well in ways that I can be proud of belonging in this home. and for me, that's really what led me to my own questions around therapy. The first time I ever did therapy was in 2020 during the pandemic. And I think at that point, I had to recognize that I have known how to take care of myself for a long time, but the challenges that I'm facing are much larger than what I've been able to sufficiently do, right, in the past. And I can't do it so well right now. And so what does it require? A kind of vulnerability, right? It's a kind of honesty with yourself. It's a kind of vulnerability to say, I need somebody else to help clean my home, but also to say, to nourish this home. And I think most of the time when we are in the most difficulty, we think that the way to go is to then go and hide into our corners and never unmute our mics and to actually be heard. And yet we don't heal in isolation. Because I think our determination is that it's like, if I've been rejected before, then I don't ever want to experience this again. I know what it feels like, right? So what I'm going to do, instead of inviting people into my home, I'm just always going to make my home so ready for them that I always give, but I never take, right? But the reality of life is that it's almost like life can't be cheated, which is really hilarious. It just can't be cheated. It almost says like it can't be mocked. If you are always giving and you never take, then your cup is left emptier. But the longing is no less, right? Because we are humans and there's a fundamental desire for being loved and for being in community and for being visible amongst the people we are with and to be valued and to be regarded. And the real question then is to say, in this particular point in your house, right? What is it that you can do that can invite the kind of warmth, the kind of light, the kind of laughter, the kind of belonging where you can say, you know what? I'm actually comfortable. I know there's dirt there at the corner, but I'll only be able to kick it out tomorrow, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean I'm left in complete and utter rubbish in this house of mine. And so really that is my primary question to you all. I have some reflection questions. I don't think we'll really be able to get to them. But I think my question to you that I leave you with today is to say, what is it, right, that you can invite into your life practically that doesn't further isolate you, that doesn't further leave you feeling rejected, that doesn't further cement you into your fear? What can you bring into this home of yours, this soul of yours, this mind of yours that affirms your place of belonging in this world? And even when the foundations sometimes are shaky and they're unsettled, what I want to say to you is that the fact that the house is already taking up space, right, that it's already created room for itself, is the fundamental belief that it wants to be there, right? Like, because if it didn't want to be there, it could have already been demolished. And then to say, what is it that you can invite into your home today that can bring so much more light and laughter and warmth into both the heart of your mind, into the home of your soul, and to this very body of yours that has carried you for so long and that continues to carry you day in and day out. I don't want to be lengthy, but that really is the question. What is it that you can invite into your home that can really bring wellness into your being? I'm going to end there. I think that if anybody has any question or any thought, please feel free to share it in the comments. But yeah, that's where I'm going to stop at the moment until leave Luvuyo or Simnigiwe to hold the space for us from here.
Thank you so much, Sihle. And I feel like a round of applause is in order, or some funny emojis. I see some halalas there going around. It was a really, really fantastic way to kick everything off. Apologies for starting a little bit late. I was supposed to kick everything off, but I got hit with a bout of load shedding. I feel like a little bit of the flu earlier on, so apologies for that. We will be transitioning over now. Sorry, I actually haven't introduced myself. That's so rude of me. My name is Luvuyo Maseko, and I am the project manager of the Youth Innovation Portfolio here at the Bertha Centre. I work hand in hand every day with my partner in crime, Simnigiwe. Today's webinar forms part of a larger piece of work that we are running at the center, looking to address mental well-being as it relates to the youth. The campaign has three objectives, and I will be sharing a chat link to the website in the chat so that you can familiarize yourself with what we're talking about a little bit more. But the campaign, as mentioned, has three objectives. One is to raise the awareness of the importance of mental health when working with young people. Second is to share best practice. So what is it that organizations have been doing that has achieved success that can be shared? I see Deborah Deirdrix is here. She has already, hi Deborah. She's run one of the workshops that I've referred to a few months ago. There are recordings on our website for those of you who would like to access those. And the third is to develop two call to actions. One is to the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Social Development to provide more social workers to support schools. And the second call to action is to the funding world to begin setting as key criteria as a non-negotiable to the allocation of funding that an organization begins to prioritize and include mental well-being programming as part of their work. Much of what we've seen within the space is that a lot of organizations are moving towards entrepreneurial and employment capacity building, but are failing to include the person that's at the heart of all of these interventions. And this is what this campaign is hoping to do. I will hand over now to my partner in crime and my comrade Simnigiwe. But while I do so, I would also like to encourage each and every one of you to visit this link that I just shared now. It's under LM and it's www.menti. And the question that we're asking there is mental health is. What is mental health for you? What does it mean? And while Simnigiwe then introduces the panelists, you can answer there. And I will also then, at the close of the conversation, share a few additional links for everybody. Sorry, again, apologies in advance if we go a little bit over. We may end just about 25 to 22. And I'll hand over now to Simni.
Thank you, Luvuyo. So glad that you're able to join us again. I was like, where is my comrade? And that dynamic share, Sihle, that was amazing. And actually, I had my Wonder book right next to me. And as you were saying, nawe kaloku ngumntu, and how do we feel seen? I wanted to acknowledge and say that when I read this book, I felt seen as someone with big hair who is being told by a grandmother that your hair is your crown, you are a queen. So thank you so much. And for those that would like to also just visit Sihle's story share and books, she's really got an amazing book that really describes the journey of a young girl who embraces her natural hair. All right, our next step, next half of this webinar is actually getting to engage with young people themselves. And we've had such a great opportunity of meeting up with young people from the organizations that they work at, as well as just hearing them, how they've been innovative and creative around coming up with some of the solutions when it comes to mental well-being. And without wasting any more time, we have Tandile Giyama from Amatuba Collective, as well as Pilani Nangam, so also from Amatuba Collective. And last but not least, Mbali Shongwe from Mindful. Hello, guys, welcome. And if you can just wave.
Hello. Thank you.
Wave at the people. Yeah, it's so exciting to have join us. And I know that maybe just before I also go into the conversation, we'd visited Amatuba Collective not so long ago, I think at the beginning of the year, and it was so buzzing and exciting to see that space, that that has a lot of young people working and creating ways of engagement, and as well as being able to get tools from some of the programs that are there. And so to kickstart this conversation, my question will be to Nangam. So I'd really like to get a sense from you, in your experience, if you can tell us more about your own journey with mental well-being, and how your peers relate to mental well-being.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, mental well-being. Mental well-being has always been a touch and go type of situation. My sad days would be very sad and take forever to get out of, whereas my happy days would be very short, like really, really short. But through all of that, I feel like if I had help when I was younger to understand my feelings and to understand that it's okay to go through emotions and it's okay to like feel your feelings and not just go over them and pretend like everything is okay, I feel like I would have been a better person. I would have been able to communicate my feelings better. I would have been able to not be passive aggressive, but just like face things head on, and also to have like good coping mechanisms when it comes to issues that I deal with, you know. So I feel like also the period of being in high school to being in university is such a weird phase in your life as a young person, because one moment you're at home and then the next you're all by yourself, and you start to realize and reflect that I've actually just always been a sad person, and now it's just heightened by the fact that I'm not at home, there's no one to check up on me, and it just dawns on you at the worst moment and you just feel alone, you know. But I'm really grateful that through everything I was able to realize that and to find things that I find joy in and things that I find interesting, to be able to get out of a space of negativity, you know. I've come to realize that as much as I'm an introverted person, that I also like my extrovert side, basically just be me hiking or me taking walks so that I can clear my mind and not be alone and be one with nature at least, and feel the breeze hit my face, hear the birds chirping, and sort of feeling alive again and being able to breathe. Because a lot of the times we are breathing, but are we really breathing? We like just, you know, sometimes you just need a very big exhale. And in terms of my peers, I feel like we all go through a lot of that. Even within the building, you'll find that people are sad, but they can't really explain why they're sad, you know, or they explain periods of just feeling really anxious or feeling really doubtful or sad, or like negative feelings that just don't have a lot of meaning. And we tend to not want to talk about those feelings and put them aside and have a facade of happiness, because I don't know where this thing of always being happy comes from anyway, because just as the seasons, we're also supposed to be happy, sad, excited, down, but we do not give ourselves a chance to be sad. We always just want to portray a side of happiness and cheerfulness and motivated. And I don't think that really reflects us as people very well, because we sort of suppress ourselves and we get to a point of breaking down. And more often than not, you break down when you least expect it, because you think that you're coping, but you're not really coping, because you are pretending to be something that you're not, you know. And we don't even give ourselves a chance to use the outlets that we know, because at most universities, or at least at most clinics, there's psychologists or there's social workers that you can go to, but we are so held back by feelings of feeling that I'll feel like I'm failing myself if I actually admit that I'm depressed, or if I actually admit that I'm sad. It'll be like, oh, okay, I'm like literally giving in to whatever I'm feeling. Whereas it's a feeling of I'm pouring into myself so that I can be able to pour back into people or to be able to be functional. I feel that we avoid conversations around mental health because they give us an opportunity to sit back, like Usihle said, and just sit and realize that actually something is amiss with me. And I didn't actually want to talk about it, but now that I'm in a group setting, I have to talk about it. And this was not the perfect time to start talking about this. So yeah, I feel like I've said too much, but in terms of peers, I just feel like we do not give ourselves enough time to avail ourselves to talk about the things that really affect us so that we can get the help that we need. Because it's more about me than it is about someone else. So if I'm good for myself, that means that the next person that gets to interact with me will get a good version of myself, and I'll also feel good about myself. You know? So yeah.
I hear you. Thank you for sharing that, Nangam. So it gives us an indication of what generally young people think about and go through. And on that note, I'll transition to Tandile, your colleague. Tandile, if you can just share with us what your program at Amathuba does, and also what are some of the challenges that you've seen or that you've been aware of while running your program, and how you try and address those.
Right. A very good afternoon. It's afternoon in Cape Town. And thank you very much, Sydney. So my name is Tandile, and I work as a learning and development lead in the organization called the Amathuba Collective. It's based here in Cape Town. We work with young people, youth. So my job is designing programs for young people that focuses mainly on three things. One is work readiness. So these are interns. They are fresh from school. Some of them just finished school a year ago or last year or this year. I do, in the program, we touch base on work readiness, personal development, and goal setting. So our main mental health program, or in how we've been linked into this topic, is through our personal development program that we do in the learning and development space. So as the young people coming in from different spaces of the world, from different spaces of Cape Town, they go through a process of being hired and all of that. And because they're coming from different areas, and our main focus is to go into places which have been previously disadvantaged. So all of these people are coming in with a lot that they are carrying on their shoulders. And through that, we find that it's quite difficult for them to just go straight into a job without having gone through some sort of personal development process and understanding themselves and the context they're coming from. And in that, we have found that a lot of them, as obviously stated before, that they're carrying a lot in their shoulders. We found that there's a lot of pressure that is coming from them, or that is coming from the society that they are carrying. So things like, oh, if you finish school, there's a need for you to pay back your family, some sort of narrative that you need to pay back your family, that you need to be able to provide, that you need to be able to show up in a more I don't know, not real way, but in a more wealthy way, that it puts a lot of pressure in them. And we then thought of what are some of the ways that we can help these young people to ease off the pressure. So my program focuses mainly on strength-based approach. So let's look at the strengths instead of looking at the faults of these young people. Let's celebrate the strengths. Let's look at the strengths so that they can be able to smile about themselves. They can be able to be proud of themselves and what they've done so far in their lives. And we use a lot of creative methods. So that would be like drawing and drumming and dancing and all of those. And we have found those to be very, very helpful in bringing about authenticity and bringing about presence in their selves, so that they are able to express themselves freely. So a question would be asked, a sensitive topic of talking about your past and how your past has been would be asked, or would be a theme for the day. And all we do is to just draw and to, or maybe sing. And in there, you find that there's a lot of authenticity and there's a lot of presence. There's a lot of real-time experience that they are feeling at that time. So they're able to express their feelings more easily. So we've found that creativity has a way of really allowing them to express themselves easily than to finding words. Throughout our program, we always touch base on thinking about themselves and thinking about their future, thinking about their goals. And all of these things that we do, even before that, through the induction that we do, are preparing them for the life ahead of them. So after the program, what are you going to do? And how has your life been changed by the program? So start thinking about what do you want for yourself? How do you want to be, the way of being? And those are very, very helpful to the young people. So some of the, if I could answer maybe your last or your second question, some of the things that we have seen very, very easy things to spot. So part of my program would do a check-in on Mondays where we get into a big circle and we just ask, how are you? And how was your weekend? And things like that. And you would find that on Mondays, the energy is quite low. And this is not because they didn't rest or anything, but because there's a lot of wrong coping mechanism that these young people go through, that they adapt. And all of these happen when they are not in the space, which is during the weekend. And you would hear now saying, before they answer, they would say, yeah. So it's like now I'm back to this space. I was away on the weekend having my fun or whatever, and now I'm back into this space again of thinking about myself. So we literally find that to be, okay, this is a piece of a tip that we can really venture into mental health and find ways that we can help these young people to cope in a better way. The space that we've opened up is a really lovely space that is fun, that is very high energy. And there's a lot of singing. There's a lot of youthfulness that is here because obviously it's young people, but we encourage them to be young and to be youthful instead of trying to be breadwinners and being providers for their families, which has helped a lot in really them finding themselves in a much more better space than when they had arrived. I think if I missed any question, please feel free to ask me again if you feel like that was not enough. But that's mainly our program. It focuses on young people, and we do a lot of personal development, which has led us into tapping into the space of mental well-being.
Great, thanks for sharing, Tandile. And as I've seen you in action at Tamatuba, it was so wonderful to get to see also how you relate to the young people that you engage with. So it sounds like a very powerful program that you're running. And on that note, I'll also just allow for Mbali, so that it doesn't seem like we've forgotten about our third panelist. Mbali, over to you. Please share about Mindful and what your organization is about.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm freezing. I've got like 4 heaters on in my room currently. But mindful it was born out of a place of creating accessible resources for mental health solutions for young people. So basically it came from a personal experience of me being at UCT and struggling to access support networks that were affordable and that actually worked well. So I think a lot of campus programs do exist, but because the need for mental health support is so widespread, a lot of them are inundated and then become either backlogged or delayed, which doesn't help people in immediate distress. And so after my own personal experience, I started Mindful Organization, which has two main aims, and that's to create safe spaces and support networks at a peer support level. And so we have multiple peer-based support groups on various social factors, yes, mental health illnesses and situations, but also on the social factors that as youth affect our mental well-being. And then we also have one-on-one support sessions. So a paired mentorship program between one of our mentors and a mentee who has gone through a similar experience to them. So whether it's based on their diagnosis or just a life path that they have similarities in. And then on the educational side, we run various workshops, basic fundamentals to mental health introduction and how to make mental health manageable. So giving youth day-to-day resources and tips that can help with your mental well-being on a daily basis. And then we also go into more nuanced experiences depending on the need of whatever community we're servicing. So looking at various aspects that affect mental health. So maybe like in the South African context, GBV has been a big theme for us. We also look into financial problems, maybe substance abuse, all of these different dynamics and intersections. And we try to do the balance of education and support, because I think the knowledge and the awareness is important, but also we want to create spaces for healing, spaces for community to destigmatize the experience of mental health and make it more of a collaborative effort to solving, to know that we can all come to spaces with whatever burdens we have and share that in a space that's respectful, it's safe, but shared in a way that's also productive and not in a way that we're just listing our problems, but also thinking together to action solutions and find ways where we can support ourselves and support the other people in our communities as well.
Well, thanks for that, Mbali. And as I was listening to you, I heard what is coming through is the importance of space, as well as making sure we maximize on collaborations. For example, if you as a young person are starting your initiative, how do you go into spaces like schools or like universities, where even though those resources are there, but sometimes young people just cannot connect with the services that are there. So I'm really liking what your organization is doing, and it's important, and it started by a young person. And just to ask Nangam, so because this is equally important on the experience, especially being part of a program and having a mentor also in that space, because I know that you have a good relationship with Tandile. So if you can share with us, what's the importance of being in a program, in your view, Nangamso?
In what type of programs?
If you were to be in a program like the one that Amatuba runs as a young person, and having do the process of induction. Yes.
Okay. What I can say, when I was in Tandile's program, the induction, it was very, when you know something, but when someone else says it, it sparks something in your brain. You're like, like I knew this, but I didn't actually think of it in this way. I always felt like that when I left his sessions. I always felt like his voice just needed to echo something so that you could actually like get to do it or get to understand it. There was one session where he said we should write, I think, 10 things that you like about yourself. I'm not sure, it was so long ago, but that was so difficult to do. it was so difficult to do because we always focus on the negative. And when you have to now speak about good things about yourself, it takes so long to actually like get into that headspace. I really enjoyed those sessions because you go in there and you're feeling like, okay, like, go. And then you go and then he's like, okay, tell us what makes you the most unique person. And you're like, I'm unique? Me, I'm unique. And then you go around the room and people are like, yes, you're awesome because of X, Y, and Z. And you leave the space feeling refreshed. You leave the space feeling like I actually want to go and get my work done. I actually believe that I can get my work done. And you just want to continue going there. You want to continue talking to the other people that are in that session with you because you're giving each other positive energy. And sometimes you don't get that positive energy at home. Sometimes you don't get it within your friends. But because the space is so like, it's such a, type of space, you just want to put it in a bottle and take it home. And everything that he teaches you, you want to keep it close to your heart and constantly remind yourself that actually I'm awesome. Actually, I'm great. Actually, I have a vision because I've put it into paper and I want to see these things through because now I actually do believe that I can get these things done. So the thing that Mbali said about a mentor and having a mentee is basically what does or did for all of us without us even realizing, because you look forward to seeing him and you sort of want to give him the feedback, but actually I'm so thankful for all the things that you are teaching us and all the things that you give us insight to, because as much as I know these things, I actually need someone to remind me. I actually need someone to reinforce them, or what's the other word? What's the word that Sika used? Affirm. Yes, that's the word, affirm. So these type of programs are really good. They bring big bright eyes in dull faces. So yeah.
Yeah, that was so insightful. Thank you, Nangamso. Affirm, affirm. That's the word. I'm also just curious to hear from all of you, because somewhere, somehow, there's a voice that needs to be in this conversation, and I'm just curious to hear from all three of you. And I'll start with Umali. Who do you think is missing from this conversation? Who else in our society that should be taking part in this conversation?
I think that for me, when I look at the solution or look at this conversation, I focus on two groups. I think, especially if we're looking at the South African context, oftentimes in Black communities, especially, or any other communities like that are a bit more conservative, mental health and wellness issues sort of be like they've become labeled as this luxury issue and something that is, you're sort of being indulgent if you feel like you have to go to a psychologist and you have to take these meds, and it's sort of this constructed Western notion that we're adopting. And so I think that type of thinking and that type of understanding surrounding mental wellness becomes quite dangerous, because if that's the environment that you grow up in, and it's constantly reinforced that this is not an issue that's important, it does delay many things for you. Maybe it delays you seeking assistance. It undervalues your experience. It makes you maybe question yourself, gaslight yourself. There's all of these experiences where you sort of are negating your experience, and without the support of those communities, the caretakers, the people that our immediate circles, I think that in some way this process will always be stunted, because maybe in your personal capacity with your friends or in your programs, you make all these leaps and bounds, but then you go back into a community that's still downplaying and bashing the things that you've learned. So I feel like we do need more collaboration and understanding within our communities. And I think mainly from the older generations and our parents and our caretakers, because oftentimes if you don't have that support, it destabilizes everything. But then also obviously this space is amazing, but I often feel the youth voice is missing. I feel like interventions to mental health care and mental support is always brought forward by this other. It's always the school counselor who is 60 years old, and now you're embarrassed to tell them like the personal things your experiences, because maybe you feel it's shameful, maybe you feel like they can't relate. So I feel like it's so important that the youth are involved in their own solutions, and like it's sort of instead of anticipating needs, we're able to articulate our own needs. And I feel like that's been very helpful in the healing journey, because when you go to youth focused spaces or youth-based spaces, the conversations are then more relevant. They're things that you can relate to, it's things that you can freely speak about, and that encourages way more healing and way more freedom and just like acceptance, rather than spaces where there's a disconnect or maybe a little bit of judgment, or it's dealt with in this compartmentalized or clinical way. So those are the two focus areas that I think are important. And I just think that oftentimes, I always speak about like the journey of mental health, we can't focus on one element or one group. It's sort of this whole holistic experience where all these different stakeholders, all these different groups, we all have to work together to make a safe space for everyone and to create ongoing conversations and keep these discourses going. So I think there's focus areas, but it's a conversation we all need to be having. And I don't think that there's any group that takes preference. I know that maybe some of us are more directly affected at this time or in this space, but I think that it affects all of us one time or another, and we just need to have that ongoing conversation and normalize that discussion for us all.
Yeah, agreed, Riley. And on that note, also just to hear from you, Tandile, anyone else that comes to mind when we speaking about this mental well-being conversation? Who comes up?
So yeah, obviously everyone is still missing. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do from all angles. And this is from my own experience and my own personal experience, if I may be clear. I feel like a man and a young man is missing in this space, is missing in this communications and in this space. There's a lot of things that young men go through that they can add value in these communications and in these spaces. They've got a lot of experience that can add so much value in these conversations. And this really takes me back, and I can even be as specific and to say a man in the rural areas is needed in these spaces. A young boy in the rural areas is needed in these spaces. Because those are the people who have these experiences, and it's quite very, very unfortunate that it might be that they don't even know the word called mental health. It might be that they've never heard of the word, and this is from my own experience. I've never heard of the word up until I was maybe 17 years or 18 years when I came to Cape Town. That's when I started to hear, oh, there's a word called mental health. To us in the rural areas, it is associated with witchcraft, it is associated with being, just being a psycho, right? If you are talking to yourself, or if you've got, anxieties and things like that. I need young men to participate in these conversations. I feel like they are missing. And really, it is from my own experience of growing up in the rural areas, having so much pressure. When you grow up, as you grow up, the pressure is keep increasing. As you grow up, that you need to be able to provide for your family. You need to be able to come up and buy cows. You need to be able to take a wife. You need to build a home. There's a lot of things that are putting pressure on these young men. It's unfortunate that it's a topic that is taboo to them, that is not even in their daily conversation or even in school, right? It's very far up until they maybe come into in these spaces here in the urban areas, and then they start being exposed to the word, just even the word. it's quite unfortunate for young people, young men specifically, who are in the rural areas of our land, that they are not able to be exposed in these conversations. And they've got so much experience that they can share and that can perhaps help us in finding solutions and in creating, co-creating solutions for our mental health state in the country.
Thank you, Tandile. I can see already from the faces of the participants, they're burning with questions. They want to ask questions. And just before we head on to the Q&As, I've got one last question, just to pose this one on the young person also in the room. Everyone is young, but also just to pose this question to Nangam. So it's just a final word or final share to everyone. I'd like to find out from you, Nangam. So regarding people supporting young people around mental well-being, what do you think? What is your question to them? For example, what are the things that you would say to people supporting young people? What is the one desire that you'd want to share with those people and ask them and say, this is what I'd like for you to support young people, or this is what I'd like you to take note of when supporting young people?
I think the one thing for me that always stands out is the empathy, you know. Most of the time, you feel like you're helping someone, right? But you're not doing it in an empathetic way. And as a person on the receiving end, I'm fragile, I'm going through whatever. I'm feeling things at a more heightened level, you know. And that's something that I want people to be cognizant of, empathy. Like, I don't know, but like empathy is very important to me as a person, you know. And also, other than just supporting the young people, right? What tools are we then giving them to support themselves when they get home, you know? Like, Tandila is there for me when I'm at work, but what is he giving me to do to help myself when I'm at home, so that when my feelings of darkness start to creep in on me, I have the tools that, oh, okay, I'm feeling sad. Let me go back to my journal and journal, or let me go back to my words of affirmations and affirm myself, or let me go take a walk, because that's something that helps me free my train of thought. Like, what tools are you giving people so that they're not dependent solely on you, and that you don't continue pouring onto people when you have run empty? Because that's also very dangerous when you continue to assist someone and you yourself are not in it, the empathy part. Okay.
Thank you, Nangam. So there's a lot that's just come out of this conversation, and I'm also feeling quite excited about this conversation, and at the same time really curious to hear from our participants on what is coming up, what are your thoughts around what has been shared today. And on that note, I'm gonna pass over to my colleague Luvuyo to take the Q&A from here, also starting from when we started the conversation with Sihle, those who had questions from then to also have this opportunity to share now. So we're opening up the conversation to everyone.
Thank you so much there, comrade. Just want to say thank you very much to Mbali, who does have to leave us to attend another meeting. So just another round of applause and warm thank you for Mbali for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Your gift will be coming soon. And at this stage, I'd like to hand over to Rochelle. Edith, it monitors the, sorry, I'm not too sure. I see your hand is up. I'm going to pass it over. Please raise your hand if you do have a question. I think we take maybe 2-3 questions max, and then we wrap up. First, Rochelle, to you.
To say something about what I've heard now this afternoon. First of all, Sinle, I was so impressed with your talking about breastfeeding and the bonding that is between the mother and the child. So that really impressed me, because coming from a nursing background, for us, that was always important. And I am not sure if that is still that important, because I think if parents bond, if a mother bond with a child in that way, then she can see a child grow up and identify any problems that there might be. And then also, if you think of, you know, people like the pre-primary schools, primary school teachers actually, that also need to identify these problems when the child is still young, then that will help young people to cope with their problems and to seek help. So I haven't got a question, but I just wanted to say that I think there's a lot can be done while the child is still young. And this generation of ours now have grown up without that. Another thing that I also want to mention is that you see young people and young mothers on their phones. They don't look at the child. The child will be pulling on even if they walk in a supermarket, that mother or father's on the phone and they don't look at the child, and they're missing things that the child might need. And that is why we get sometimes people kidnapping children. And all of that social interaction is gone from the parent. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Rochelle. And mindful of time, so I'll just hand over to the last person if there's a question. It's a lot of pressure now on the last person. I'm just scrolling through all of the names here to see if there's a hand. Okay, there doesn't seem to be a hand. So what I will do to also make life easier for everybody is I will share all of the links that have been shared in the chat with everybody in a Word document. We do have all of your email addresses. There's a very exciting opportunity as of last week, the day before Youth Day, so I think it was Wednesday, we kicked off a essay writing competition. There we are set to give out about 20,000 Rand to the top 3 essay submissions. And the whole idea is we are encouraging young people to share their innovations and interventions that relate to mental well-being. So if there's a young person, if you are a young person and you have an idea that can look to challenge and tackle this issue, then please do submit your essays to us. You do have a chance of winning a decent amount of money and maybe a nice little something in your pocket before December. Anyway, thank you so very much for all of you for joining us today. Another massive thank you to our panelists and our speakers today. As ever, if you want to get a hold of us at the Bertha Centre around our mental health related work and any other piece of work that you'd like to talk to us about, we are youth focused and youth crazy. So there is no wrong conversation when it comes to having conversation about our young people. Just maybe a goodbye wave with everyone. Encourage those who may have had their cameras off to maybe turn it on, and give us a little bit of a wave. Hey, Nicola, it's good to see you again. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your afternoons and have a lovely weekend.